Discuss how he's listening to the people and making change is Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti. Thank you so much for joining us, Mayor Garcetti.
Thank you.
So good to be with you at a tough moment. You guys are like oxygen out there right now. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Oh, we definitely appreciate that. Now, the City Council of Minneapolis just said they are dismantling the police department. Can you please give us your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to know more about what they're talking about. Obviously, public safety is something we all believe in, but we know that the model has to continue to grow and change. We've got to save Black lives. We've got to make sure that we go from the old gladiator mentality to a guardian mentality. In certain cities, that might mean blowing things up and starting from scratch. In other places, it's about taking even bigger and bolder steps than we've ever taken before outside of our comfort zone. But certainly in Minneapolis, I think there's a lot of people who feel like the vine itself was too toxic to continue. I want to hear more of what they mean. And I think all of us, whether it's in Minneapolis or Los Angeles, New York, Memphis, we've got to fundamentally ask ourselves, if this is not just a moment, but a movement, how can we all do something to not put the burden of everything wrong in society onto policing and always turn to policing to solve everything wrong in society? Hold folks accountable, but at the same time, can we all evolve as a society to a better way of understanding public safety, that it isn't just about policing?
Right.
Okay.
Now, Mayor Eric Garcetti, my question for you is, what made you decide to reallocate $250 million from the police department budget?
Well, it's going to include from the police department, but if we don't rise to this moment, I said the other night, I said, we either meet this moment or we miss this moment.
Right.
And I don't think we can afford to miss this moment. No. Right. Look on the streets. It is beautiful. This is more protesters from every neighborhood for a longer period of time than I've ever seen in my life about anything. And I've been part of big protests. I've been part of anti-war protests, the Women's March. But if you look at the collective impact, and not just in this country, this is about racial justice around the world now. If we don't meet this moment, shame on all of us. And that's tough. That means sacrifices. I've only got one pie, and that pie is even smaller than ever because of the economy and COVID-19. But that's when we do show who we are. And we had squeezed other departments. We hadn't squeezed the police department because traditionally it's like, you can't touch that. But I do think we can do well for public safety and still say, look, if we're able to invest in things that prevent crime before it happens, or intervention programs that keep young people from joining a gang or being a victim of or committing a crime, isn't every dollar that we invest precious? Second, it's not just about money for public safety. If we want to look at what kills Black people in America, it is oftentimes we see, as we saw tragically in Minneapolis, an unnecessary death, and that comes from a police officer. But there's many, that might be 0.01% of the deaths of Black Americans. You are going to be more likely to be in jail, unemployed, unhealthy, undereducated by being Black. Here in Los Angeles, if you're born in Watts, you live 12 years less than if you're born in Bel Air. So if we're not talking about health and homelessness and housing, if we're not talking about healing and trauma, if we're not investing in education too, don't expect to make this a society that addresses racism if we're only talking about public safety and policing. So I want to pull not just from any one budget, but it has to include the police department as well. Right. I want us to prioritize the things that kill people silently every single day without a headline, a protest, or anything else.
Right.
Now, what are your thoughts on the countless images of police using excessive force against otherwise very peaceful protesters?
Some of the pictures are heartbreaking. I mean, we're better than that. And we need to have accountability for anybody who violates policy, to see, somebody in a wheelchair bleeding from a beanbag round. Look, it is tough. And the first couple nights, we nearly lost a police officer who had his skull cracked. I know it's tough to be on the line. The first two nights we had some people who tried to take advantage of peaceful protest and attack officers. But also flip that around. We can never say it's okay to use unnecessary force.
Right.
And at this moment, I was very proud where we got to, but anything that is out there and any officer who violated policy will be held accountable. Los Angeles has independent civilian investigation. We have some of the strongest laws in the country. We need to fix the whole criminal justice system to make sure that we get convictions when there's truly, terrible behavior. But for me, I'm committed to winning the hearts and minds, not just of the city, but also of our officers, of saying, if you're a good officer, you have nothing to be worried about. In fact, you need to be a leader. But if you're a bad officer, we don't want you on this force. And if you're somebody who's taken a bad made a bad decision, you're going to be held accountable for that.
Mayor Garcetti, you also made a decision this past weekend to remove the National Guards, and what was your reason behind that?
We didn't need them. I thank them for their service. They're everyday folks. You know, they're dentists and people who work in manufacturing facilities and nurses and everybody. They were very helpful to help downtown in particular and West LA, places that had been looted, to hold those places so we didn't have to have a police officer there. But as soon as we could send them home, I wanted to send them home, and I thanked them for that. I think LA County hung on to them for a couple extra days. Same thing with the curfew. As soon as I could get rid of the curfew, I got rid of it. We were the first big city in America, I think, to unwind it. Portland also had to, the day before, because we saw that the peace had come. Early on, anybody who thought this was an excuse to throw bricks at cops or to loot, a store and take all their stuff, we kind of collectively, including our police officers who did a good job making sure that the looting stopped, but also the protesters saying, you're not a part of this movement. You have nothing to do with the death of George Floyd. We don't want you here. And I trust Los Angeles. I don't want us to be in a lockdown. We are not a police state. We have to show that with our actions, and we have to trust that those moments come. It was scary to do, right?
Yeah, it was definitely scary to do. I want to say LA definitely held it down. Now, Mayor, do you have any plans to meet with Black Lives Matter and the organization wanting more divestment? And are you willing to meet with them on their terms?
Yes, absolutely. I've been talking to a number of Black Lives Matter folks. I had 24-hour notice for a meeting I couldn't attend to, but I made sure I had a rep out on this weekend, and then we immediately offered other dates. I want to have an open door here. Even earlier on, 7 years ago, when we had some shootings here in Los Angeles, said my door is open, and I respect the street. Some people are organizers, say, look, my role is to push, and I don't want to negotiate. And others say, let me in that door. And so we have a huge coalition of folks who are also working with Black Lives Matter. Remember, we're not starting from scratch in Los Angeles. We have former gang members who lead organizations now to bring the peace. We've got folks who are out there helping in Skid Row, doing security that come from the community without having to have police do that, so we can de-escalate where there's a lot of mental health. We have a ton of folks that want to be a part of how do we spend this money, where do we move forward, but absolutely, open invitation, happy to do that. I mean, I will say I want some conversations which we can have first behind closed doors before everything gets broadcast out, because there's some really hard work to do.
Right.
And I want to create long-lasting relationships.
And conversations need to happen, Mayor. Conversations definitely need to happen for us, for all of us to come into an agreement. Yes. But I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Black Report. And Mayor Garcetti, I want you to know you are welcome here anytime.
Yes, come back, Mayor Garcetti.
Thank you.
I will.
Much
love. Let's keep this conversation going, and appreciate you.
Thank you.
Good to
Take
see
care.
you.
Peace.